Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Music Teacher Mastermind Podcast, a place where independent music teachers can find focused challenges, fresh opportunities, some answers to common problems, and hopefully a spark of inspiration. I'm Jaclyn Mrozek, though you can call me Jackie, and one of my favorite mindset tools is the acronym COPI, which stands for Challenge, Opportunity, Problem, and Inspiration, and is why I'm always bringing that up. In my masterminds, I like to kick them off by coming up with one word to help describe our current mindset. And using your COPI can help you do that, because sometimes it is difficult to come up with your one word. And voicing your mindset helps you to take a step back, reflect on what needs your focus at the moment, and help you to move forward with purpose. Right now in my own studio, if I had to sum up my mindset in one word, it would be redirection. Lately, I've been finding myself getting caught up in distractions that I don't really need to be focusing on, and they're only adding stress and making my to-do list grow instead of shrink. So this week, I am intentionally refocusing on what matters most, and that is my students, and reconnecting with why I started teaching in the first place. And as always, I would love to hear from you. What's your COPI this week? What is that one word that best describes your mindset as we head into a new week? Think about it. Let me know. And as I'm working on redirecting my own focus back to my students, I am reminded that sometimes the best way to get back to our foundation is by revisiting the methods we use in our very own studios, which brings me to our incredibly, amazingly wonderful special guest today. I am so excited to introduce Dr. Julie Hague, co-author of the popular Piano Safari Method, which is a series I personally rely on in my own studio. And you guys have probably already noticed that because I'm pretty sure I bring it up in almost every single episode. Julie has a rich background in piano education, teaching applied piano, piano pedagogy, and group piano at institutions like the University of Missouri, Oklahoma City University, Ohio University, and the Hart School Community Division. Julie holds a PhD in music education with an emphasis in piano pedagogy from the University of Oklahoma, where her innovative dissertation on elementary piano technique was even nominated for the Best PhD Dissertation Award in 2006. She also earned degrees from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and the University of, I hope I say this right, Puget Sound. And she's learned from some of the best in the field with names like Jane McGrath, Barbara Fast, and Reed Alexander. If you've ever had questions about Piano Safari, I think you will really like this conversation. Julie's passion for teaching and her genuine care for her students really shine through every word. You can tell she just loves them, and she just loves teaching. And I believe her insights will inspire you in your own studio. And with that, let's get started. Hello, teachers, and welcome to the Music Teacher Mastermind Podcast. My name is Jackie, and I will be your facilitator. Today, we are exploring the beautiful, wonderful, my personal favorite method of Piano Safari, as well as answering some questions that were sent in by some of my listeners. And we are going to do that with co-creator Julie Hague today, and I could not be more thrilled. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
I'm so excited to talk to you about this today. Before we jump in, would you mind sharing a brief background of your musical journey and how you came to create Piano Safari with Catherine?
Sure. Well, personally, I started piano lessons when I was 6. There was this old antique upright piano in our house with like chipped ivory keys, and the middle E stuck during the summer, and there was a mouse that lived under it. So that was the beginning of my journey. Not very exciting.
Oh, that's so fun. Wait, a real mouse? Did you have a real mouse living in there?
There, yeah. But so I took piano all growing up, and then did my undergrad at the University of Puget Sound in Washington State, where I got my bachelor's of piano performance, and then went to the University of Illinois, did 2 master's degrees. And then when I went to the University of Oklahoma to do my PhD in pedagogy class, I met Catherine Fisher. And speaking of mice, I met her like the first week I was in town when I had just moved there, and she had just moved there, and she was living in this apartment, and we had to deal with a dead mouse there. Hopefully, mouse won't be a continuing saga in my journey because I don't like
I'm
mouse that
sitting here
much.
thinking about all the animals and such in Piano Safari, and I'm like, we need a mouse.
We
Is
need a
there a
mouse.
mouse?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I just realized that now. It seems like there's another mouse in there. But anyway, so we met in pedagogy class, and she said, I've always wanted to write a piano method. And I'm like, me too. And so we started sketching out our ideas while we were in school. And then took about 10 years before we launched the first version of level 1. And then it's just grown from there.
Oh, I've never known that
Yeah.
story. It's kind of just a simple, organic way of coming together, just saying, hey, I really want to do this. I really want to do that, and just outlining it. So, what exactly inspired you to get into the whole animal piano safari world? Where did that come from?
Well, we were brainstorming about a title for the method because before that, when we were working on it, we just called it the method.
Yeah.
And I don't know, we like animals. We wanted it to be timeless, so we're not going to write a method about cell phones or pagers. So all kids like animals and nature. And so it just came like Piano Safari seemed to be a good name for it.
I think it worked out well because you might not be able to see, but behind I got all my Piano Safari guys up there. It's amazing because even my high schoolers will like grab one to watch them at the piano. They really do love animals. All right. So when you were creating this, I just have to ask, were there any major influences as you were looking, because Piano Safari is a little different from a lot of the popular methods that we're used to. So
Yeah, that's a great question. So both Catherine and I had taught many of the piano methods on the market throughout our years of teaching before that. And so we sort of started to see what we thought worked best with children, both to teach them music and also to teach them how to read music. And so we saw some of the benefits of teaching by rote. And we wanted them to be strong readers, and no method had really done those both together. So we thought, what would happen if we put rote and reading side by side? So it's not like you teach rote for a few years before they start to read, but most methods on the market are like almost 100% reading only. So we combined the two, and what happened was just amazing. Like the kids, they understand music, they understand how it's supposed to sound and how it's put together, because the rote pieces are all based on keyboard patterns, specific keyboard patterns that little kids understand, like a chromatic pattern of black, white, or the groups of 2 and 3 black keys, or the music alphabet. So to them, learning a rote piece doesn't seem like random notes, like play this note, then play this note. It's very structured. So they start to understand the structure and form and patterns that go into music. And then that translates over to their reading too. So the kids are constantly telling me, look, it's a pattern. And they'll show me a pattern even in a reading piece that I'm like, oh, I never saw that before, but you're right. That is totally a pattern. We wanted to also teach them how to read from the beginning, because that's so important. And then we had found that we had some success using the music tree method and the intervallic approach. So Frances Clark was an influence, and we feel like we're building on what she and her co-authors started, but in our own way, using the intervallic method in a little different way. So it just kind of, that combination of the rote and reading was really unique. And then the technique exercises came out of some of my dissertation research, where I interviewed teachers around the country how they teach technique to beginners. Also, my research just changed everything about how I teach. We saw some rote teaching in that as well when I was observing these teachers. So I guess it was just a process of different things, like teaching on our own and then studying these different methods, and then my dissertation research, watching other teachers teach, and then just putting the best of those ideas into Piano Safari.
I have to wonder, as you guys were outlining this, how many times it shifted and changed as you did your research.
Yes, it did change some. Like we started with a partial staff, and then some color coding that we're like, we don't really need to do that. Definitely there were some changes it went through. And We did a first edition, and then in, I think, 2018, we did our second edition of level 1 to improve some things. Because as teachers, we're always learning and growing. And so we gave it our best when we first started writing, but then after teaching it for a while, it's like, oh, I see these things that could be improved.
Oh,
So
yeah,
we did
for
do
sure.
another edition.
But I feel like it has been very well thought out, because I've even noticed there's a Piano Safari teacher page on Facebook, and I see a lot of questions come through, and I've asked a lot of questions, and you guys are always great at being very prompt with helping, which I think is such a beautiful thing to have such easy access to you guys. There's a very good, thoughtful reason behind almost everything, down to how the pages are designed with not a ton of illustrations and distractions and stuff. So I love it. All right, so let's talk about how you incorporate both rote pieces and reading pieces in your curriculum. Do you do, now, of course, I've taught it, so I know how it is. And I know that we have the freedom as teachers to skip around. I mean, would you say that's kind of how it goes?
So there are 6 units in level 1, and the first one is an introductory unit, which is just some rote pieces to get them playing at the piano, because kids, a 7-year-old, when they come to their first lesson, they want to play cool sounding pieces. So we want to, engage that excitement and give them pieces that sound great to play. And they're based on keyboard patterns, as I said before. And then in unit 1, we start to have the mixture of rote pieces and reading. And Piano Safari is unit based, so teachers can assign the pieces within a unit in any order you like that works for your individual student. So it gives some flexibility. One week, a student may need a new rote piece, and another week, they may need a new reading piece. And then the sight reading cards correlate with each unit. So then you can be assigning the sight reading cards throughout as well. There are 2 types of rote pieces also. There's just standalone rote pieces, and then there's the ones that correlate with the 7 animal techniques, which are scattered throughout level 1. So for each of the 7 animal techniques, you have just a technique exercise where they learn how to play the motion, and then you have a rote piece so they can use that motion in a piece, and you have an improvisation piece so they can explore that motion in a more free way. I tend to have my own order that I like to introduce things, but that would be different for a different teacher. So as long as you stay within the unit, assign all the pieces, and then they graduate to the next unit.
I really like that. So you can kind of pick and choose the order that you have as long as it's within the unit. And you even have unit maps that teachers can access if they need help kind of tracking within those units.
Yeah, we created those because it's kind of a fun way, instead of having an assignment sheet, to just print out the unit map, which you can download from our website. And then I usually print it on colored cardstock and then tape it together. And it has squares for each piece in the unit. And then we have piece cards. So you take the piece card, and when you assign that piece, they stick it on the square. So it's like a visual assignment for the whole unit. So they always know which pieces they've done, and they want to try to collect all the cards to fill up the whole unit map. So
I've never used that before. Yeah. I don't know why, but okay.
And I don't use it with every student, but I find it particularly, for some reason, with little boys, they just love collecting the cards and sticking them on the unit maps. But then for some other kids, I might not do every piece in the unit, because the book has so many pieces. It's like a really large curriculum, and it usually takes students at least an entire year, sometimes a year and a half or 2 years, depending on how much they practice and how old they are, to get through it. So it's a huge curriculum. And so as a teacher, if you're like, whoa, I don't know how they can get through all these pieces, this seems like a little bit too much for this student, I think they could move a little faster. Or, in every single method, there's pieces that certain teachers may not like as well as others, or some that may not be the kid's favorite. And so you can just skip over those if you want, but if you use the unit map, then you probably should do all the pieces to fill it up. So sometimes another way to do the piece cards is I'll give them the card and when I assign the piece, and then we'll tape them together in a really long train. And then as they learn more pieces, their piece card train gets longer, and it's like, whoa, is this as tall as you now? Let's stand up, let's measure and see if our piece card train is as tall as you. It's taller than you. I think it might be as tall as me. Now it's stretching across the room. Wow. So they see how many pieces they've learned, like 50 or so, by the time they get pretty far into level 1. So that is also another way that I use the piece cards.
It's so motivating. This is such a great idea. I'm getting really excited just by doing that. Let's talk about those sight reading cards real quick, because another thing that's very motivating for my students is that each unit has a different color. And that's such a big deal when, oh my goodness, I'm out of the pink cards. Now I'm going to the blue cards, and what color is next, and that kind of thing. But I think from what I gather, there's a lot of different ways to use the sight reading cards. Would you mind sharing just what they are, how they work, and different ways we can use them?
Sure. So the sight reading cards correlate with each unit of the repertoire book, and they work together. So you really have to have both, which is why the student should have the level 1 pack, which has both the book and the cards, because we have reading pieces in the book, of course, but we want to really be sure that they have all these reading concepts down. So instead of adding even more reading pieces to the book, we decided just to have short sight reading exercises. So the first 2 units are pre-staff, and then when they get on the staff, it's an entire unit of seconds and then an entire unit of thirds before they finally combine seconds and thirds, because we found in the past that some other books will have a few pages of seconds and a few pages of thirds and then stick them together before the student has had time to really digest those 2 intervals. Because with little kids especially, just seeing whether the note stays on the same line or goes up or down takes some mental effort for them. So we have a whole system of how we analyze and mark the cards with the student, like in the level C cards where they are first getting on the staff. It's all seconds and unisons, and we have them mark the unisons or sames with their sames color. So just the act of analyzing each card, it's like a mini theory assignment, really helps them read well. I usually just do the cards at the lesson for a while until I'm sure that they understand how to do it. And if they have some parental support at home or they're old enough to do the cards at home on their own, then I can assign some. So they play each exercise 3 times, and I put little boxes on so they can check off that they've played it 3 times. And then there's a rhythm tapping exercise at the bottom, and then they move on to the next card. It's nice not to have to practice the same cards over and over. They're always moving on to a new thing. One thing that really stuck with me from Richard Chronister's book, I read his chapter about reading, and he said, reading is not about reading completely new things. It's about seeing patterns you've seen before again. So it's like not completely foreign. I remember when I was like 11, I suddenly really realized I can read any music because I know what all the notes are. It was like this awakening to me. So when a child approaches a sight reading card, it's not like they haven't seen these things before. It's just constant reinforcement to be able to get faster and faster at analyzing and reading fluently. And it takes a long time to get fluent reading, which is why we have so many sight reading cards.
I love it. And they're in smaller, like bite-sized pieces. And I really like how it isolates the hands. And sometimes you do get the grand staff, which always feels like a big deal, but they get excited about that. But I like it because instead of having all this noise of all the other, elements that maybe they've been learning at the same time. So I really like that. So while we're talking about this, can you maybe walk us through what a typical Piano Safari lesson might look like?
So let's say that they're in level 1. And they hop on the bench. I say, how was your day? They say, great. I'm like, okay, let's play. No wasted time.
Right to it.
And for the level 1 kids, I usually say, what would you like to play first? Because that gives me a lot of information about what their favorite piece is, because they always choose their favorite one. And so it'll be a balance between pieces that they've been practicing, and then I'll introduce 1 or 2 new pieces, depending on how much they can handle. And then I usually devote 10 or so minutes to sight reading cards. And Some other fun ways that I use the cards, if you have the student who doesn't mind sitting still and doing what you tell them, then you can just go through, 2 or 3 or how many of her cards they can get through in the lesson in the 10 minutes, and it's all good. If, like most kids, they like to bounce around a little bit more, you
Mhm.
could hide the cards around the room. They go find a card and then play it. Or I have this sticky hand, so we put the cards on the floor and they launch the sticky hand to try to catch a card. Like, I call it fishing. So
Oh,
um,
fun.
I mean, my 2 yesterday. Thursdays are when I have my littlest kids, so I have to have a lot of joyful energy on Thursdays. And they both of those kids love fishing. They would do that the entire lesson if I let them, but it really helps them get off the bench for a little bit and then also to go through the sight reading cards. So we have time for new pieces, we have time for review pieces and making them better, and then we have time for sight reading cards and then a technique. I usually lump technique in with the pieces so that on their assignment, I try to have as many pieces as they can reasonably handle. And that really varies from student to student. So some kids, 3 or 4 on their assignment would be the max. And then I have others, and I'm like, now you're really good at this piece. Should we put a sticker on it and pass it? Or do you want to keep it for review? And they're like, I love all of them. I want to keep them all. And so you have some kids that'll have, maybe 3 or 4 working on pieces and then 5 or 7 review pieces. So they're sitting at the piano for quite a while if they go through all that every day, which the more pieces they have, the longer they'll stay at the piano. But of course, there's a balance because some kids just really don't work that way. It's just too overwhelming. So I'd say between 4 and 10 pieces on their assignment sheet, somewhere in there.
Oh, okay. That's
And then as
awesome.
they
And
get older, of course, there'll be fewer pieces
yeah,
as the pieces get harder, like in level 3 and beyond.
and they really are beautiful pieces.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
rem- I remember getting the level 3 book,
Mhm.
and I was playing one of the pieces for a student. It was one of the first ones, and I got so excited. I was like, "Let's play more." And I think I ended up sitting at the piano for the majority of her lesson trying out the I probably should have done it before her lesson, but I just got so excited because they're very mature sounding, beautiful pieces. They're not, I don't know, they don't always sound super kiddish. And I think kids like that because it has mature sounding. We get the pedal in there pretty quickly. It's just a lot of fun for them. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
like
think
that.
Catherine and I really believe that kids are much more musically sophisticated than we give them credit for. So we didn't want to water down accompaniments because we think they won't be able to play with those complicated rhythms or anything. And we find that that's a benefit of teaching by rote, that they really understand phrasing and form in music. So they actually play better with the teacher accompaniment, because it makes more musical sense to them when it's all together. So we really did aim to have really beautiful sounding pieces from the beginning and then all the way up through level 3 as well.
They really are. And you know what I noticed as well, I used to have a difficult time having students agree to do a duet at a recital where I accompany them. I don't have that problem with the piano safari pieces because they love the sound when I come alongside them. And sometimes I'll have a high schooler and a little kid playing a duet at a recital, and it's really, really sweet.
Yeah, and I just wanted also to say that Piano Safari Friends is one of our most recent projects. And that is for children ages 4 through 6, and it's all rote pieces and what we call follow the leader pieces, which are sort of like pre-rote pieces because the student only has to copy one measure at a time because the teacher plays a measure and the student repeats that measure and then the teacher plays another measure and the repetitions are built into the piece. So it's a really easy entry for even 4-year-olds who can't remember a long phrase. They just have to remember a little piece. So that book has a little bit of pre-reading, but hardly any because we really want to be age appropriate. And many 4-year-olds are just not developmentally ready to read music yet. Some are, but some are not. So it's primarily follow the leader and rote pieces. And each unit centers on a letter of the music alphabet. So since this is newer, I have these 2 little boys who started last year who are brothers, and they're 4 and 6. They were 4 and 6, and I put them both in the Friends book. and they loved it. They practiced so well. It was great. So now they're coming into level 1, and the now 7-year-old is flying through faster than I've seen almost any kid fly through level 1, because he has such a foundation from the Friends book. He understands all the rhythm patterns. He understands, I mean, he can play physically very well. His technique is good. And so it's just made level 1 so much easier for those students on the younger side, that now I always put my 6-year-olds in Friends first. Anyone younger, 6 or younger, I put them in Friends because it just gives them such a solid foundation, and then they can just fly through level 1 much faster. So I would encourage people to go slow at the beginning of piano study. There's no rush, especially if they're really young, because if you take the time at the beginning to lay the foundations of technique, musical understanding, reading, and listening, then later on it will pay off and they'll be able to move faster. Whereas if we try to push their level too soon at the beginning, then it could backfire and they can just miss foundations that they need.
This actually reminds me of a question that somebody did ask me, and that is, how do you get the parents on board? So I feel like a lot of parents send their kids in and they want to see all these results and everything. And I feel like that's where the rote comes in, right? Is that kind of where you would go as far as talking to parents as maybe a teacher
Yeah.
is transitioning?
Right. So when I get a new student, I have them come for an interview, and they walk in. I say, "Nice, how are you?" And then I bring the child directly to the piano and teach them some of the rote pieces right away, just so I can see how that child understands and works, if they follow my instructions. And so the parent sees right away their kid is having fun. Their kid can play music right away. And then I say, this is the curriculum that I use, and it's a combination of learning pieces like this, where I just show you on the keyboard. Those are rote pieces, which really develop their listening skills and their understanding of music. And then they're also going to learn to read music too. And most parents are like, sounds great, sign me up.
Yeah.
But, sometimes if you have a parent that's like, well, when are they going to play scales? I'm like, well, there's certain foundations of technical motions that you have to go through first before we start playing scales. And then I can go into the whole, it's best to lay a solid foundation at the beginning. And then later on, they will shoot ahead in their abilities when they're older. Unfortunately, as we all know, learning to play the piano well and be an actual pianist takes a long time, like 10 years. So I think the biggest thing that the parent wants to see is that their child is enjoying it, that they're learning, and that I know what I'm doing. Like, I, as a teacher, understand what I'm doing. I'm confident about why we're doing it this way, and I know how to make it fun for the student. And so that's usually how I have the buy-in from the parents, though I have had the occasional one that's like, they should be playing a C major scale hands together after 2 months of lessons. So but that's
Yeah, we have those, don't we?
understand it. And you can also relate it to how they read English. Like, you read books to your little kid. They don't understand all the words, but they can't read the words, but they understand the story. And then at the same time, they're learning to read, but that takes quite a long time. So it's sort of similar to the rote, where they're learning the music and the reading component that moves slowly alongside.
Well, and they're getting ear training from it.
Yeah.
And I even had an adult student of mine that I had her for about 10 years. And I want to say I started Piano Safari when she was like 6 years in with me. And the first recital that I had, where I had some students playing music from the Piano Safari method book, I didn't say anything to her she didn't know anything about me switching around with my younger students. And she came up to me and she said, "Your students sound so different." Like, there was no pausing. She said it was the most enjoyable recital I've ever sat in. And I thought, wow, there's a testament right there.
Yeah, that reminds me. Yeah, so they do develop this confidence at the piano. It's like happens all the time with every kid. They get a couple months into study and they're like, I'm so good at this one. Listen. And then they're just like bouncing around with great technique, and they have great aim, and they're like so confident. And they're like, this is easy. I'm so good at piano. And that's what we want.
Yeah.
A
Yes.
similar thing happened. My dad moved from California here to Connecticut, during the pandemic. And
Wow.
he came to one of my kid recitals. Like I said, do you want to come with me? I'm having a kid recital. He's like, okay. So he comes. And after the recital, he's like, that was actually enjoyable. They sound really good. As if kid recitals should be misery, you know? But yeah, for recitals, like I mix the levels so that it's not little to bigs, because then by the end, the little kids have already done playing and they have to listen to these really long pieces by the high schoolers. And they're like, when's this going to end? So I mix up the levels. And if the piece has an accompaniment, we're playing it as a duet. You know, no one wants to listen to like a little piece by a little kid with that's just them with no accompaniment. Like, yeah, it's not as fun. So we make it an enjoyable experience for the audience as well. And then I make sure that they're completely prepared. And then of course we have cookies, or actually one time we had a potluck. That was really fun. Potluck
Yeah,
dinner.
I just tried that for the holiday recital, and
Hmm.
it was great. It was
Yeah.
really, really good. So there was no food left for me by the time I made it out there. So okay, real quick, I do want to go back to the parental stuff, because another question that I had was, how much should the parents be helping the student at home, and how can you get them more involved at home? Do you need them more involved at home?
What I've come around to is we can't mandate the same for every family. So I work with each family individual to figure out what works for them. So right now I have Miss 8-year old, maybe she's 9. She's in level 2. And her mom took violin growing up. And so her idea of practicing at home was to set the timer for 20 minutes, and the little girl would practice until the timer went off. And that has worked great for 2 years now. So they've increased,
Really?
level 1 was 20 minutes. She's like, I think she can go longer. Maybe we should go to 30. I'm like, how about 25? Let's just not ruin a good thing while we have it. So she's like the happiest little kid, and after dinner every day goes and sits at the piano until the timer goes off. That doesn't work for other kids. It's great. So other kids, I'll say how many times they should play each song. That works for them each day. And some of the older ones, I'll give a time limit. One of my students came in and he said, timing it really stresses me out. I'd rather just practice until I've made progress. And I'm like, that is fine. That's what we want, progress. So that is fine. You don't have to keep track of the time. And I know some teachers like the parents to sit in, and other teachers don't. I sort of let the parent do what they want. So I think you just have to work it out, like what kind of teaching style works best for you, and then what kind of practice expectations work best for a family. And then reminding them, like, this is an investment. Like, you're not going to get better if you don't practice. Like, I remember I had this little girl and she was not really making any progress. And finally I told the mom, I'm like, you're paying a lot of money for lessons and she's not progressing because she's not practicing. So you need to either like make her practice, or you're wasting your time. And so the mom was like, okay. And she started the whole timer thing, like half an hour. And the little girl just blossomed, totally changed. So sometimes the parents just need some
Little
direct
nudge.
reminders from us. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've come around to, it's not like a one size fits all thing.
So it really isn't any different from any other method.
I think I want to educate parents more from the get go that this is a long term thing. Like, you can't take 3 years of piano and then think you're going to have piano for life, because you probably won't get to a point where you can then just learn whatever music you want on your own. It takes more like 8 or 10 years before you become an actual full-fledged, advanced, functioning pianist for that to happen. I'm not very confrontative with
Yeah.
parents. Sometimes it's good to just say, this is what I expect. This is the expectation, because I want you to get what you're paying for and your child to become a musician.
And teachers, we are allowed to do that because we know what we're talking about. And I think a lot of us, yeah, we aren't confrontational, we're people pleasers, and but they're paying us for a reason.
Right.
And
And we
you know,
can say it to them in a nice way, but they don't know. We need to educate them because they don't understand the whole piano thing necessarily.
I like that more. We
It's
just need
like
to
when you go to
educate
your
them.
accountant, they have to explain it to you. We don't understand taxes.
Nope.
That's what-
So I'm going through a few other questions here before we wrap up. We talked about the length of time it takes to get through each book. One teacher actually asked me in comparison to other methods. And I think there is some comparison of like, oh, if we take this method, we can get done with 3 books before we get done with the Piano Safari method, just the first book.
Yeah, so the level 1 book is like 132 pages long. So some of the other methods might have level 1 divided up into 3 books, but if you add up all the pages, it's going to be a similar length for those 3 books times the number of pages, and a similar price too. We prefer to have the all-in-one book because it's just fewer books to keep track of. And again, I would say it's best to go slower at the beginning and lay those foundations. So we're not in a hurry at the beginning, and it'll pay off when they're in the intermediate levels. And like my student I talked about, he went from like level 4 music to level 10 plus music in the space of 2 or 3 years. So even if they spend, let's say, a whole 2 years in level 1, 2, and 3, like 2 years in each level, then they're still going to reach the advanced level by the end of high school. Because in junior high and high school, something clicks and they just take off with their level. So it's like level 1 takes a long time, level 2 takes a long time, level 3 takes a long time. Then I'll give them some level 4 pieces. They're inching along in the intermediate stage. Then they get to level 6. Oh, no need to do 7. Just let's skip over to 8 and 9 and 10, and there you are. So it's like gentle at the beginning and then a huge upward slope if all the foundations have been laid. So it's not a race at the beginning.
No, it's really, really not. Okay, awesome. And just to kind of clarify, you have the Piano Safari Friends, 6 and under, right? And then you have the level 1 for ages 7 and up. Now, if they start a little older, I think it's 10 and up.
Yep.
Then we go to the older beginner.
Yes. We have the older student books for ages 10 and up. But we do get a question sometimes like, what if my student is finished the regular level 2, but they're turning like 11? Should I put them in the older student? And we say, no, you just keep them in the series they start in, because actually the regular version level 3 is very sophisticated too. So yeah, so if they start when they're 7, 8, 9, then you would go through all 3 books of the regular series. But if they're 10, 11, and through adult, then you could put them in the older student series and start them there.
And then another question, and I think this goes along with the older student. It says, do older kids like this, or do they find it quote unquote kiddish? And that's when I was thinking, I wonder if this teacher knows about the older student pack, because it does go a little bit faster. And I noticed that you guys take some of the original level 1 pieces out of it. Did you do that, thinking about those preferences?
Yeah, so the older student version does have some overlap with some of the pieces from the younger, but we gave them different titles. Some of them took out the animal names. So it's more sophisticated for sure. So if they're 10 or up, I would definitely put them in the older student version.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love that. Last question that I want to end with, and this, and I can relate to this, the learning curve for teachers when switching. And I think that for me, at first, I was intimidated because I thought there was going to be all this training that I would have to go through. And that ended up not being the case. It was a 2-day conference that I was like, oh, this is great. And then it was just a matter of me just starting it and trying it and learning myself. But what would you say to that, to teachers who maybe want to switch over, but they're thinking, oh, I don't have the time to learn this, or all that good stuff?
Well, I think one of the things that sometimes gets lost is just the fact that it's a unit-based thing. So that gives you a lot of structure as a teacher. It's like, okay, I'm in unit 1. We just learn all the pieces in unit 1, but they don't have to go in the order of the pages necessarily. You can skip around. And then there's 2 types, rote and reading. So the rote pieces you teach in little tiny sections, just showing them how to play it directly on the keyboard. So that's basically all there is to rote teaching. And then the reading, teachers seem to understand better how to go about that. And we have teacher guides and a Piano Safari Institute where there's courses, like pre-recorded courses you can watch at your own pace, or live courses sometimes as well. And then the Facebook group, you could ask questions in there.
I
So
love the
I would
Facebook
say
group.
you can do this. It looks very different, but once you understand the different components, that there's rote, there's reading, and you stay within a unit, and then just trust the process also. Like, it's going to work. Like, if a student doesn't quite get something the first time, it's okay. Just, find a different way to introduce it, break it down into smaller steps, and try again. You don't just want to say, oh, well, this is not working for this kid, because as any method that we teach, we have to become an expert at teaching that method. And then we find all these little tricks and know where all the little pitfalls are in each piece. So as you get more experience teaching the pieces, then it goes more smoothly.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, are you going to be at any of the upcoming conferences like the MTNA or the NCKP this summer?
And we're planning to be at NCKP.
Awesome. Yay. Well, I will be there too. So, all right. And then is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, our overall goal was to help children become confident and joyful music makers. And when we work with children, it's all about the joy that we bring to the lessons. I just love seeing their joyful response to these pieces and their confidence. Like, I'm so good at piano, listen to me play this. Oh, and I came up with my own piece, I sometimes when I'm doing my work all day, I'll be tired and I'm like, oh my, I have to teach this afternoon. And then as soon as I put on my teaching clothes and turn on the lights in my studio and the kid walks in, it's like, I'm a teacher. This is so fun. So, yeah.
Well, that radiates through your pieces for sure. They're so much fun. And I can tell that you are probably just a super fun teacher. And that you and Catherine really thought about the kids and you really thought about how they learn and what they like. So it's very evident that this method was made with some love for them. So, and I'm coming from me who just loves the method. I'm very grateful for everything that you've contributed. And I'm very grateful that you agreed to come on here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you.
Alrighty, teachers, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Music Teacher Mastermind Podcast. And thank you to Julie Hague for sharing some background on Piano Safari and answering our questions. Be sure to join us next week when my guest, Jana Williamson, stops by to dive into recital prep. Known for her popular YouTube channel and how to teach videos, Jana is an expert at preparing confident performers and helping teachers gear up for spring recitals. And trust me, if you are planning on doing a spring recital, you don't want to miss this one. As I'm wrapping up, I want you to know I will be closing the window of consultations and coaching sessions soon. So if you are looking for someone to walk alongside you for studio setup or a reset, feel free to schedule a free 15-minute call on my website at www.pianocats.com/piano-teacher-consultations-1. And remember, that's Piano Cats with a K. I will put that in the show notes in case you can't remember that one. In the meantime, don't forget to visit my website for plenty of free resources for music teachers. And be sure to sign up for the email list to get instant access to all the latest tips and tricks. If you found value in today's episode, I would be so grateful for a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Your reviews help more teachers discover the show and benefit from the insights we share each week. All right, teachers, that's it for now. Keep teaching, keep loving, and keep practicing, and take care.